Announcing the arrival, our distinguished guests. You want to go and plug in first? Tan Sri Dato Sri Dr. Jeffrey Cheah, Foundation Chancellor of Sunway University and founder and chairman of Sunway Group. Tan Sri Andrew Sheng, Distinguished Fellow of the Asia Global Institute, the University of Hong Kong, and Puan Sri Dr. Lim Suan Po. Professor Dr. Elizabeth Lee, Chief Executive Officer of the Sunway Education Group. Dr. Lee Weng Keng, Advisor and member of the Board of Directors, Sunway University. Mr. Evan Cheah, the Chair of the Board of Governors of Sunway University. Distinguished guests, colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and salam sejahtera. On behalf of Sunway University, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the Jeffrey Cheah Distinguished Speaker Series. Universities have always existed to prepare society for the future, yet rarely has the future arrived as quickly as it is today, and it continues to change. Artificial intelligence is reshaping work. The increasing multipolarity and porosity is redefining global competitiveness, and the shifting geopolitical realities are transforming the world around us. As many of you know, I'm a cancer geneticist. So when I first received the title of today's lecture, I was delighted. I thought, ooh, it's about genomics. It turns out it's geonomics. In my defense, it's only one letter different. But in genetics, we do spend our lives proving that one letter in our genome can make all that difference. And talking about making a difference, there are a few Malaysians whose ideas have influenced not only our nation, but also the way governments, central banks, and international institutions all across the world think about the future of the global economy. And Tan Sri Andrew Sheng is unquestionably one of them. Tan Sri Andrew is widely regarded as one of Asia's most or foremost economists, financial regulators, and global thought leaders. Over a distinguished career spanning more than 5 decades, he has served with Bank Negara Malaysia, the World Bank, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, and as chairman of the Securities and Futures Commission of Hong Kong. He has advised governments, regulators, multilateral organizations, and financial institutions all across the world, helping shape responses to financial crises, economic transformation, and sustainable development. Sorry to economists, but economists generally have a reputation for explaining tomorrow why yesterday's predictions didn't happen. I told you so. But fortunately, Tan Sri Andrew has spent his career doing exactly the opposite, helping the world prepare before the future arrives, and today he will continue to help us in that preparation. Beyond public service, he has become one of the world's most respected commentators on the intersection of economics, technology, geopolitics, sustainability, and artificial intelligence. His books and writings continue to influence policymakers, business leaders, and academics worldwide. And it's perhaps fitting that today's Jeffrey Cheah Distinguished Speaker Series brings together two distinguished Malaysians whose life work has focused on building institutions. Tan Sri Andrew Sheng has devoted his career to strengthening the institutions that underpin stable economies and responsible global governance. Here at Sunway, our founder and chancellor, Tan Sri Dato Sri Dr. Jeffrey Cheah, has dedicated his life to creating institutions that nurture talent, advance knowledge, and transform lives through education, research, and service. Today, Tan Sri Sir Jeffrey Cheah's vision is reflected in the extraordinary rise of Sunway University as one of the world's fastest rising universities, alongside the impressive growth of the Sunway Group and the emergence of Sunway City Kuala Lumpur as one of the most vibrant and sustainable cities. The latest development of Sunway Square exemplifies this philosophy, bringing together the university, the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, and the Sunway Business School, with the world-class Jeffrey Cheah Performing Arts Center, 2 office blocks, Sunway Square Mall, and then directly connecting with the Net Zero Carbon Faculty of Engineering and Technology, as well as Malaysia's #1 ranked Sunway Medical Center and Sunway Sanctuary for Assisted and Senior Living, this is far more than a collection of buildings. It is a carefully curated ecosystem reflecting the Jeffrey Cheah Foundation's deliberate and long-term commitment to integrating education, healthcare, culture, sustainability, and community into a place where people can learn, innovate, heal, and thrive throughout our lives. In fact, the impact isn't just in Malaysia. Through the Jeffrey Cheah Foundation's philanthropic donation to the Jeffrey Sachs Center of Sustainable Development and the United Nations Sustainable Solutions Network, as well as the SDG Academy, Tan Sri has invested 20 million USD to actually promote these efforts, not just in Malaysia, but around the world. And so both iconic leaders truly understand that societies prosper not merely through wealth, but through strong institutions, ethical leadership, and sustained investment in people. And this afternoon, Tan Sri Andrew will deliver a lecture entitled Genomics, Money, AI, and Power, Surviving in a Radically Changing World, and How Education and Talent are key to survive and thrive going forward. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure, and please join me in giving a huge, warm, rousing welcome to Tan Sri Andrew Sheng.
Thank you very much, Professor, for that wonderful introduction. My mother, if she was alive, would have been extremely proud. Go back home, my wife will tell me where I went wrong. Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Dr. Jeffrey Cheah, Tan Sri, Datuk, Professor Elizabeth, my friends, tuan-tuan dan puan-puan yang dihormati sekalian. Selamat petang dengan selamat sejahtera. Allow me to speak in English. The reason why I do this is because, as the moderator said, I have been struggling all my life to try and understand today. The philosopher Kierkegaard said, we understand life looking backwards, but we live our life forward. And so one of the contradictions of life is that we have nothing to look except backwards. We have nothing to tell us about the future. Anybody who say they can predict the future is not necessarily telling you the truth. It's their own opinion. So what I'm trying to do here today is to share with you how I think about these issues, not whether it's going to be right or wrong, but where, our minds have been so colonized by the rise of the West that we have forgotten our own strengths, weaknesses. And so we may need to look inward to see what is our story going forward, right or wrong. Because every society is basically molded by stories, by beliefs, by values. And if we don't even understand this, we can't see forward. So how do we analyze backwards is this question of genomics, AI, money, and power. And how do we survive in this rapidly changing world? So let me, I hope you can see it. So my friends always criticize me, especially my wife, say I talk too fast, I talk too much. and I make things too complicated. So I don't understand what you're trying to say. So I'm going to try to make it very simple, as I can. As Einstein said, you can make things simple, but it cannot be too simple. Because when it's too simple, that's meaningless. Okay? So this is a 3-part lecture. First part is, an analysis, not exactly my own. I just drew many, thoughts together and use a framework to try and think about the present. And then given that total chaotic situation that we face today, where does Malaysia fit into this? And I'm not going to use Andrew Sheng's view. I'm going to use a very polite version of what OECD, in its very typical, this is the organization for the advanced countries. And Malaysia has been the border of moving into advanced countries. So they vet membership to see who qualifies to join them. And their report on Malaysia, which was just published last month, is a very useful summary of this. So I'm not going to try to comment on Malaysia. I'm going to use what OECD says about Malaysia, except that I may have framed it in my own little way. And then lastly, if we were to change all these problems that we have, what should we do? Because the West today is in trouble because there's too much theory and not enough action. And so the result is the people are unhappy. A very good friend of mine who recently passed away, he said, the GDP is up, but the people are unhappy. And that's exactly what's driving the extreme politics that we see today. So the first part is on the paradigm, the second is on Malaysia's, depending on the OECD report, and the third one is role of education in universities. This is where I am. So if I make any wrong statements, just say it's the rubbish that Andrew Sheng puts out. So the first picture, now, I just want to say this. If you think the slides are made by AI, they are generated by AI, but what I did was to actually produce 60 over slides and then put it into the AI, please summarize for me. And it came out to be about 30 over slides. But I had to adjust, a few in between. So the first slide that comes out is the issue is that things are changing so fast that we actually need to realize the old linear way of looking at things. This is the data, this is the trend, we look at it linearly. What next is linear? That's gone. Because every morning when Trump gets up, he's going to change the world, right? So anybody who can predict what Mr. Trump is thinking is going to make a big fortune. And I just saw in Bloomberg, somebody is now willing to pay $100,000 a month in order to buy the data that will give a Trump decision nanoseconds ahead of the market. And that nanosecond would be able to front run the market enough to make a lot of money. Okay? So we're in that sort of situation. But a complex system has 4 parts. The meta, what we call the 4 M's. Meta, the way you look at the problem. Okay? The macro, the big picture that you all see. And then we all understand the micro, the details. But the difference between the macro, the big picture, and the micro is actually institutions. So for example, if we want to influence money markets, who do we use? The institution of the central bank. If the central bank want to influence your behavior, they do it through the commercial banks. Except today, the stock market is bigger than the banking system. Okay, so institutions have changed, the big picture is changing, the institutions reflect the mindset, the meta of big thinkers before. But if the best and the brightest are making mistakes, the institutions are making lagged mistakes. And that's what we're seeing, this complex interaction from four parts of a complex system, not only from within, but from without. There is an exogenous shock, and there's an endogenous shock. Okay, that's going on for those of you who are economists. So the reality of MAGA is that nobody's coming to your rescue. Before MAGA, America stood for the best and the brightest. And if you have the level playing field, if you have problems, America underwrites the risk. Today, America first, you're going to be second. You're going to be third. You're going to be fourth. So nobody's coming to the rescue, right? So this is an issue. So essentially, at the end of the Second World War, in terms of purchasing power parity, the United States was as much as half of global economy. Europe was in shatters, Japan was in shatters, the rest of the world completely, bankrupt. Today, America is lucky to have 1/4 of world, GDP in financial terms, in monetary terms, but in GDP terms, in purchasing power terms, just under 1/5. And China has now reached slightly above parity. Some say overtaken America in purchasing power terms, but in dollar terms, still lower than that of America. But instead of one, like the Tolkien, one ring to rule them all, it is now divided into hobbits, in which the hobbit is linked up with Sauron, linked up with the White Tower, everybody for themselves. So it's now end to end, many to many. We don't have to go through New York for every single transaction now. We can do it through the Chinese CIPS, through the blockchain, whatever. And that's why the dollar is now shaking and there is talk about de-dollarization. So if you really look at the way things are, and unfortunately I can't use a slide, but on the left-hand slide, America is now 30 trillion market GDP. China and the BRICS, who are the rising powers, are now roughly just about equal to the G7, of which China alone is 20, right? And then Euro has 28, okay? And America is today still the largest fossil fuel economy in the world. They have the largest shale oil, the largest oil and gas producer, and effectively through Israel, I hope I don't offend anybody, basically control the situation in the Middle East, which is also a very large oil and gas producer. And they have unrivaled technology and financial resources. Now, on the other hand, the global south, including China, is now the world's largest manufacturing supply chain. And today, it's not the renminbi that's challenging the dollar, it's gold. Foreign central banks' reserves of gold now more than what they're holding in US dollars. It's just amazing, but it's happening, right? So it's not about the dollar losing its position against other currencies like euro, yen, or renminbi. It's losing its position against gold and silver and other resources. And of course, EU is caught in the middle, because they are now stuck with Ukraine. It's another unending war, and they don't know how to get out of it, right? And the real question for Europe is the fundamental question: is Russia part of Europe or Russia part of Asia? That's a question that's still undecided. So now, what is the big paradigm change? The big paradigm change is that everything is driven by information. But information is driven by energy. And so when we talk about power and energy, political power, military power, everything is driven by energy. If there is no energy, nothing moves. So there are two real forms of energy. One is the sun, the other is gravity, right? The gravity drives the tides from top going down to below. That's gravity. And then your fossil fuel is basically the sunlight onto the plants billions of years ago. They die, they become fossilized into coal, oil and gas, etc. And basically power is when, if you really understand it, came when the Portuguese used wind power to find Africa, and then, not find, but the white man discovered Africa and then tried to circumnavigate the world. And then the British used their coal to drive steam. And then the Americans improved on that by using the oil from Texas and California, plus the gold discovery, etc., to drive industrialization at scale, which eventually, kind of overtook Britain. Now, information is physical. It's physical because it is driven by energy. And so why is money related to energy? I went to Bhutan, and what did they do? They have a landlocked land. They have lots of hydropower, exactly like Sarawak. And anybody who has free energy can use energy to mine Bitcoin. And suddenly I realized, my God, money is actually energy driven, okay? And what does data centers use? Water and cheap energy, okay? It doesn't have labor even, because the data centers, can be 24 hours dark rooms with nobody except the guard looking at it, and they just run on the chips and energy and lots of water, right? So the best way to think about money, energy, and systems is that when your money that you earn through your food, your water, and your gaji, your salary, that's your flow. But you have to store it somewhere. And where do you store it? You store it either in cash or you store it in a bank. And the bank is basically the battery. And if the battery has non-performing loans, corruption, or leakages, your battery dissipates and you lose everything, which is why governments must, regulate banks, okay? And so the output is that then you draw the money from the bank and you use it in the manufacturing, you earn more income. So actually everything is an energy chain. And that's where the Chinese began to understand. If they were to have a choke point in their oil and gas, they go for their free energy, they go lots of coal, and now they go nuclear, they go solar, they go hydro, and suddenly they are the electricity power of the world, whereas the Americans are the oil fossil fuel power of the world. And what is America's biggest choke point? If they were to run their data centers or manufacturing centers and they don't have enough electricity capacity, they can't build anything, because everything works on electricity today. So now with electricity, you have technology. With data digitized, you have technology. And we are now going through this super cycle. So there are two super cycles, two shocks today that we're facing, other than the Trump shock, okay? Right? The big fight between the elephants, because the fight between China and US is a perang gajah, the fight of big giants. But first, we're facing an AI shock, right? The AI shock is spending huge amount of money. The total spending on AI, capex on AI, is $725 billion for this year alone. That's not chicken feed if you think that the total world, operates on $120 trillion, right? So The capex alone is driving GDP in countries like Malaysia, in countries like Taiwan, in Korea, right? America, China, that's being driven. At the same time, as AI improves, the old industry is undergoing creative destruction. And where is the other big shock? The China shock. You know, everybody said, oh, China, you know, there's somebody called Gordon Chang, who predicted the collapse of China 40 years ago. He's still predicting it. But China today has, you know, because in the COVID years, we did not understand China. A lot of people outside did not go and visit China. China transformed from an old world economy into the new area of EVs, solar, batteries, you know, AI, etc. And it's true to say today, 50% of the world's AI scientists are Chinese or ethnically Chinese. Or they may be located in America, they may be, you know, in Southeast Asia, etc. But the China shock is delivering what I call the deep-seek shock. They get 80 to 90% of the performance at 20% of the price, right? So, you know, or 60, 70% of the price. So, you know, these are, you know, huge shocks that we're facing. And then because we are, you know, doing all this using the US dollar, suddenly we find, my goodness, the United States is growing deeper and deeper into debt. The United States debt is now $39 trillion. Consider this. This is 1.3 times US GDP. Okay? 39 trillion out of the global GDP of 115 to 120 billion is huge size. And United States is going through a situation whereby the growth of the US stock market depends on 10 companies alone. If you take out the 10 companies' performance, the stock market in the United States is flat. And suddenly, NVIDIA has created a wonderful circular growth. I invest $1 billion or $10 billion in an LLM, you know, large learning model companies like Anthropic or OpenAI. OpenAI has to build a data factory. All the chips have to come from NVIDIA. It is the first time in history, it's not quite the first time in history, it's the first time we've identified it. I book an asset that automatically book it into my profits. It's just amazing, right? Okay, when I first came back to Southeast Asia as a young chartered accountant, my fellow article clerk, who is today a very prominent accountant, he went to a Southeast Asian country for which the name will not be mentioned. He said that when I asked him, what was your experience in this area? He said, this is a country that can transfer a credit in liability immediately into profits, which means that if you owe somebody some money, you don't have to pay it, it's automatically profit. But NVIDIA's turned it around. You know, you instead of getting a liability, you got an asset, and the asset immediately becomes your profit, right? So, you know, we now have moved digitally into the AI world, and the AI world has changed money from traditional gold to fiat currency printed by government, and now to digital cyber currencies like central bank digital notes and tokenized assets or liabilities. And today, digital versions of what they call stable coin, digital currencies that are linked to gold or or dollars. And that is a huge market. Think about what is happening. If you are able to tokenize, that means if this computer, which is about, let's say, $600 US, or let's call it $1,000 US, can now be tokenized. I can sell this token, which you claim on this computer, to anybody without the central bank knowing, because I just do it through the internet. I can transfer not just my asset, I can transfer my liabilities without you knowing it. What does it tell you? Central banks, governments have lost control in the new digital space. So there are therefore so what has happened when there's so many things changing at the same time? Okay? Passive strategy, business as usual, is dead. You can't use business as usual because somebody's going to overtake you through AI. Somebody's going to overtake you through sheer sanctions or tariffs, right? Penang is the 6th largest semiconductors, producer in the world. What are they most afraid of? During the tariff negotiations, if the Americans had said, instead of 16% or 19%, we now tax you 25%, immediately the Penang manufacturing center would move elsewhere. Because if elsewhere has a tariff rate of only 5%, and you are now being taxed at 25%, no question, they move. They may not move immediately, but these are arbitrary policy decisions that can damage your whole business model. So the brutal reality that we face now as businessmen, and even as individuals, right, is that national security overrides your profit. Tomorrow, one country A says, national security, you cannot do this anymore. Your business model is gone. Not only you cannot do this anymore, they say this choke point now applies. You have no more supplies. Your business model is disrupted. Can you appeal to any court? You can't appeal to anybody, right? That's the brutal reality. And so the micro execution mandate, when everything is kind of not within your control, you have to self-strengthen. Number one, nobody's going to help you. Number two, you help yourself because you cannot rely on anybody else to help you. And therefore, the brutality of the world today is eat lunch or be lunch. Okay? So, and this phrase is very critical because that self-strengthening comes back to the role of the university. Okay? And I'll explain this later. So the reality of this world is that the geo-economic warfare, and the warfare is done either through trade, tariffs, sanctions, tax, whatever you call it, basically is pushing capital all the way to Southeast Asia. We are living in the fastest growing region in the world. Hitherto, provided there's nothing going to happen in Taiwan or South China Sea, the safest neutral region. Okay? And that is also a choke point because the choke point is not just the Straits of Hormuz. The choke point is not just the Red Sea. The choke point is also the Malacca Straits. Right? So, and then the money and the talent is now beginning to come. So the very fact, and I don't like to say this, that Middle East is in turmoil, the Gulf states are in turmoil, capital that used to reside there now has to hedge. And some of that money is coming out east, and you can see that through Singapore assets under management, Hong Kong under assets under management, going up like that. Okay? So, you begin to see this. And so now let me very quickly summarize the impact on Malaysia. Now, I'm going to be totally diplomatic. This is not Andrew Sheng's view. This is the OECD view. I don't offend anybody. But I will state right upright. If we do it right, the opportunities of Malaysia are huge. But that's the caveat that OECD is now talking about. So the first thing, the OECD said is that we persistently outperform regional peers. GDP per capita is rising, and you notice that, right? Malaysia is 70% of the OECD 100, the left-hand axis. And we are ahead in the GDP capita, ahead of Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Philippines. But look at the bottom three. They are all economies with 100 million population. Indonesia with 280 million population. If they reach our GDP per capita, they will be 8-9 times absolute GDP bigger than Malaysia. They already are bigger in absolute terms than Malaysia. And Vietnam, because of steady, fast growth, copying China with the Chinese, Communist Party model, okay, they, are now growing faster. It's one of the fastest economies in ASEAN, and because they're 100 million, they will be one of the outstanding performers within ASEAN. And so, Malaysia is at a critical junction. The nation is exposed to significant climate hazards, deteriorating productivity trend, and a severe labor skill mismatch. That sums up from an outsider who's saying, if you want to join the advanced country club, watch out for these issues. Okay? So if you look at that, and this is what I did, taking up some of the charts from the OECD, if you look at our top 3 export winners, every one of them needs strategic rethinking. When I was in Bank Negara, Malaysia was just beginning to produce oil. We were 800,000 barrels per day. Today, we are 580,000 barrels. And I asked, why? Why is it that we have so much undiscovered oil, all across the South China Sea? Our oil production didn't increase. Answer was, our gas increased. But since 2022, Petronas revenue has gone down. Dividend to government has gone down. On top of that, okay, we have not explored significantly enough in long-term exploration and then development, particularly in the deeper water areas, so that, if our oil and gas at current prices are doing well, Malaysia will again be driven by new energy. So that's the oil and gas. The second one is palm oil. We gave our leadership in palm oil to Indonesia with our both hands. We trained their labor force, we gave them all our technology, and now they are number 1 and we are number 2. And now in Indonesia, as you know, there are problems with the oil palm sector, and some of them are thinking to come back. What is our strategy going forward? We have very little value added at the downstream level, okay? And where the value is going to come from, palm oil will also suffer from this image that palm oil is killing orangutan, okay? And it has huge sustainability issues. That's palm oil. The third one is technology. Thanks to great foresight in the early 70s, Penang started its semiconductor by welcoming our 7 samurai, which are the Toshibas, the Motorola's, the Intel, all these 7 companies today are global giants, and Penang has grown with them. But our local champions is still very small. Whereas if you look at Taiwan, Taiwan is all about local champions. TSMC, which owns, is a $1 trillion company, is local. Foxconn is a local champion, right? Samsung, Hynix is a Korean local company, okay? The Japanese leading technology companies are local companies. They don't rely on the foreigners. Of course, they supply to the West and they draw Western technology, but they relied on domestic growth. Why is it that Bayan Lepas was started 10 years ahead of Hsinchu in Taiwan? We now end up 6th position, and they are very close to number 2 or number 3. So we have to ask these questions, right? And then the other areas like tourism, which I really feel very energized coming to see the youth, in Sunway University, the youth families enjoying, the game park, the theme parks, right? What Tan Sri Jeffrey Cheah has done is to build the ecosystem. It's no longer about picking one thing, it's about building the ecosystem, the infrastructure, the talent, the apps, the branding, the strategic positioning. Once you are able to do that, it's very difficult for other people to take away from you. So our big problem, this is OECD charts, is that Malaysian incidents, exposure to climate hazards, especially flooding, is getting worse and worse. Okay? And we're also facing rising seas. If the seas rise, our coastal areas will be damaged, including our areas that produce some of our palm oil, our rice, etc. On the other hand, even though we are a net energy exporter, we have so much into fiscal subsidies that the government currently is facing difficulty how to balance the books, right? So there are key issues. But what the OECD is very polite in writing about this is that structural bottlenecks and governance fragmentation are choking national productivity. So if you look at the charts, productivity levels are going down in spite of the industrial master plans. Right? Now everybody is going down, but they're not going down as fast as we are. So what do they think are the checklists? Restrictive FDI. Now you can say we may not want to have so many FDI, but everybody, frankly speaking, is competing for FDI, right? And then secondly, weak product regulations. Their calculation using the OECD, product market regulatory index suggests that our index is double, maybe 2.5 times larger than the OECD index. Our regulations are such that the ability to move very quickly into area by area is facing these kind of transactions costs, put it this way. And then lastly, investor confidence is directly undermined by fragmented governance structures, including leakages such as corruption, etc., which we all understand, right? And it's not easy to solve. I'm not pretending that it's easy to solve. But the real choke point for Malaysia is that we have a very young population, but a large part of our population begin to age very fast. And at our young population, they are not foundationally prepared for the STEM and the PISA examinations. Okay? And you can see this, right? So the education outcomes have deteriorated, and the labor market faces a severe mismatch between existing workforce skills and the high-level cognitive demands of the multipolar technology shift. 50% of the employers surveyed suggest that most of the employees that they're getting from the universities require significant retraining, on top of the need to train into AI skills, advanced manufacturing skills, etc. Okay? And this problem is not unique to Malaysia. The real reason why America has trouble onshoring manufacturing is that the labor force has missed out what we call engineering intelligence, not artificial intelligence, engineering intelligence. As Steve Jobs said, when they wanted to change the plastic, glass of the iPhone, only China could assemble 1,000 engineers and say within 7 days you fix the problem. If they were to, ask anywhere else, you would have to gather American engineers from all over the place, fly them in from out in the world, and they don't know each other, they don't know how to work with each other, whereas you can find this in Shenzhen, you can find them in Shanghai, anywhere. So these are the issues that we now face. Education, talent is a choke point. So we now face the ultimate leadership mandate. If we are to strengthen we have to be ruthless in this. And I was taught this by Tun Ismail, the first Malaysian governor, who was my mentor, just as Tan Sri Lin Si Yen, who is on the board of governors of Sunway University, was my mentor. And they emphasize one thing: central banking is about efficiency, professionalism, and integrity to the point of ruthlessness. You have to be cruel to be kind. There is no compromise on integrity issues. There is no compromise on efficiency issues. There is no compromise on the resilience, stability issues. So we have to do two things at the same time. We have to strengthen our node end to end, and we have to cooperate with people who are willing to cooperate with us. That's the challenge that we face, right? So now let's move on to the last part, which is the role of education at universities. Now I'm walking into the lion's den because this is a university full of brilliant professors, students, who have been all their life working on education. And pardon me if I say things that an outsider can say, because after I left university, I basically went into policy and in crisis management, and then into strategy, into complex thinking. And now I come back to realize human beings are responsible for human faults, so you really need to change human beings in order to change the whole system. Okay? So what is the role of education? And this is my favorite slide on the left. The old model, pardon me if I'm saying so, is like an assembly line. You put young people inside, and 2 years of kindergarten, 5 years of primary, 6 years of secondary, 4 years of university, maybe 3 more years of PhD. You come out, you are prepared to do everything. This is why Europe is in trouble. Europe is run by PhDs who have no working experience on the real world. And so everything they do by theory and by regulation. They think they can solve a problem by writing a regulation. The Americans don't believe it. The Chinese don't believe it. The Chinese just do it. The Americans say, I have a way of going around the regulation. Right? So the result is, America got AI, China got AI, Europe is still struggling. They have the best universities in the world. How come they don't have Google? How come they don't have Alibaba? How come the manufacturing industry, is in deep trouble? Because they are exactly like our Hong Kong people when I was working in Hong Kong. They look at the rear mirror and they said, the Chinese are very far away, they'll never catch us. Then 5 years later, they said, wow, getting close. Then today they say, where are they? They are ahead already. You know what I mean? You really need to rethink the game. The old game is dead. Now the education system reflects the paradigm of the old days. Before Christopher Columbus, before 1493 or whatever, it was the axial period. You go to a university, you go to a mentor who taught you government, philosophy, medical, warfare, everything. Your master taught you everything because everything is everything. There was no such thing as you go in just to study, sociology. You study anthropology. And you come out after your PhD, you're an expert in anthropology, but maybe not expert in geopolitics, in energy, in engineering, in AI. And all of a sudden you find that, these silos cannot work together. The trouble with the university today is the biggest problem, and I'm speaking as an amateur, is how the management knock heads between different faculties and different departments so they work together. In the old business sense, the IT guys don't understand the business and the business guys don't understand IT. And if they don't work together, the system does not work. So we have gone from the linear, risk-averse system to a new world of organic uncertainty for which The ones that will survive will be creative, adaptive, entrepreneurial. So how do we make that big shift, right? And that big shift is done through the transformation of aspiration into impact. Western philosophy was great on theory, but low on impact. We wish the world would be totally democratic. We wish the world would be totally fair and just, but the world is not. How do you change the aspiration into impact? Is all about execution, about action, because without action, talk does not generate trust. Trust comes from not only talking, but walking. So AI is about aspiration that is transformed into impact, right? And there is a bridge to this, and that bridge is the university. And that's my point. It is your opportunity, right? So today, the aspirations are about environmental, social harmony, and governance. But we cannot do this by saying, I am totally risk averse. I don't want to do anything. Business as usual is dead. You have to take risk. If you are in the desert and you have no salt, the only way for you to get salt to survive is to go out into the unknown. Islamic finance was not about borrowing from banks and paying usurious interest to go out into the desert to trade. The Prophet's family were all traders. They could understood. You go through the desert, which is total unknown, through equity, which is shares. You lose, I lose, and you have total faith and integrity. Because if you, a member of the camel team, cheat, the other side cheat you, you get lost in the desert, you have, totally, no water, huge risks. But those who survive make lots of money. And that's how Islam went from Medina all the way to Andalusia in less than 100 years. What does that tell you? The early believers of Islam, the faithful, took huge risks, were totally open to new ideas, and created the best universities in southern Spain, which was where European civilization rediscovered their Greek, Persian, and ancient wisdoms, even from India and China. It was that openness, tolerance, faith, risk-taking, entrepreneurship that created the flower, of Islamic civilization. So if we cannot predict outcomes, we can only learn by doing. If you can tell your kid, don't play with fire, they will only learn if they play with fire and then they get burned. You cannot learn swimming in theory. You have to throw the kid into the pool and swim. And then they will swim. Right? So universities cannot overprotect. Neither can you just feed them so much information that they cannot judge for themselves what is wrong. I look at our kids carrying backpacks, full of books with a curriculum, that today your AI can tell you everything. Your AI does not even rely on language because you can speak Bahasa into it and English will come out. You can speak Bahasa into it and Arabic will come out. Okay? You don't even need STEM because anybody who knows how to use your device can get anything. So we have now reached through AI a new revolution. So the only way how a complex system will behave is when you modify it, you take risks in making the change and see how it behaves. We cannot predict the future. We can only intervene in it by taking huge personal or system risk. And so we must experiment. And Malaysia is the perfect place to do that experimentation. Okay? So now, what is the ultimate design challenge? So we can no longer manage an isolated campus. Today, you are no longer a campus, right? Universities in America, universities in Australia have now extended their campus into networks of campus. Universities have moved from an expense to become an industry. It's profit-making, right? So what did Buckminster Fuller, this futurologist, who said humans' future is like spaceship Earth. On the one hand, we are going to burn because of climate change. On the right-hand side, we're going to destroy ourselves by nuclear war. Which are you going to choose? We are in spaceship Earth, in which the captain is fighting with the chief engineer, and the first-class people want to go to space. That's the joke on Elon Musk, going SpaceX, right? Okay? So Buckminster Fuller said, make the world work for 100% of community in the short possible time through spontaneous cooperation without ecological offense. That means we can't destroy the environment or the disadvantage of everyone. That was spoken in 1970s, and it's beautiful. So where are we in universities in Malaysia today? You are experts than me. We have a certain number of maybe 20 public universities that get the money from the government, and today suddenly they discovered foreign students, just like the UK and Australian universities discovered foreign students are an income. But private universities can no longer stand still. Private universities have to be value-led like any other business. It may not be for profit, which is exactly what Sunway University is. Because every cent you make is plowed back into research and development and into the benefit of the students, not just the students, but the community. Okay? So our private model is now struggling because we're fighting exactly like China. We're cutting fees to the bone, and there are a lot of loss makers. And the public model is big numbers, 18.6 billion. But what's the challenge? The challenge is that 63% of employers cite skill gaps as the primary barrier to transformation. So if our business cannot transform, our business cannot compete, our business dies, where are the jobs? Who are you training the students for when the business has no jobs? Clearly, we must provide the students that the business and government wants, but not in the old way. Why is that? Because, a lot of knowledge is today obsolescent. Silicon Valley today hires, 40% of hires do not finish degree. They just ask one question: what project did you work on? I don't care whether you got a degree or not. If you work on this project, tell me why you succeed and why you fail. If you don't understand why you fail, out. If you understood why you fail, you're hired straight away. Because when you come to my company, you're not going to make the same mistake. Okay? So everything is about talent. And everything is about value. So where is the value? And therefore, we need to talk about the brain economy transmission. And this is a summary of a chart I took from somewhere. Okay, my understanding is that 92 million jobs will be displaced by AI, but it will create 170 million jobs. The only trouble is, a lot of young people coming out today are going to lose jobs. Because if you look at all the S&P 500, every time a company announces their quarterly results, first thing they do is, I'm going to cut 10% of my workforce. And if you are a big consulting firm, you don't need interns. I lost my research assistant. Every time I did some work, she had to work 2 to 3 to 5, 6, sometimes 6 weeks to get a pack of PowerPoints, references, everything together. Today, my AI I just ask the right questions, my AI will generate all those information, pull things together, and I can tell them, please write the essay for me. Now, I don't necessarily agree with this, right? but I want to see what the AI will tell me, what the references are, what should I look, what don't I remember, and then I use my own experience to tell the story right. So today is no longer going to be top-down. It is, if we are to generate the end-to-end, it's bottom-up. It's both top-down and bottom-up, not overly top-down. And we must have the courage, the trust, the knowledge, the diagnostic power, asking the right questions. In today's world, anything can be the answer. If you ask the AI the wrong question, the AI will hallucinate. If you know how to write the right question, the AI will point you in the right direction. So the winner will be more winners, and the losers will be even bigger losers. So we have basically a paradigm shift. We can't control everything because the boss does not know everything. The boss has to delegate, right? That was the old way. It was scientific management. Today, it is about organic management. The successes of today, yes, you have to have a very good boss like Tan Sri Jeffrey, but look at the way he delegates it to his team of workers, and with the good team, and the team working with the right professionals, the skills, with very good feedback mechanism, you have created a world-class university, going to be even more world-class in the days to come. And all this is not just an algorithm. It is the organic way of how, in the circular way, you maximize people's talents, and you use the wisdom of those older than 60, not just to play golf, but to mentor the young. So, in a more complete system, people like me who may not see beyond, 10 years from now, or at least I'll become gaga, the chances are very great that I'll become gaga by then. I want to, mentor young people so that, I want to tell them where I made the mistake. Whether you make the mistake or not, that's another issue. Okay? But my responsibility, is how to have a heart-driven empowerment. And this is through storytelling. This is building trust and values and investing in future generations. And how in doing this, you profit the environment. You do not destroy Mother Nature. Who destroys their own mother? Right? You nourish it, you cherish, you celebrate your parents so that they transmit their wisdom and knowledge for you, so you are empowered to transfer that knowledge, to the next generation. So the new heart-driven empowerment comes from a quote I learned in Bhutan. And this young Taiwanese boy who spent his time teaching in the deep villages of Bhutan gave me a line that was very powerful. The heart of education is the education of the heart. It is your emotions, it's your value, it is your heart that finally rules the brain, right? And so the system in action today is how do we take the end and scale it globally. Before 1493, empires did not scale. But globalization was discovered after 1493 because the model that was learned, by the Portuguese and then the Spanish, then the Dutch, then the British, and later adopted by Americans, became globalized. Okay? And they scale. So what is the big problem of N? The individual, the village, the small community, the startup, they all go through the valley of death. Every one of them needs energy. The young ones need energy because the parents have to support the young because they can't earn any income. The startup, your nasi lemak maker, your noodle maker, cannot make money because it's only the family helping, And if you want to start up something, maybe an uncle will help you, the village will help you, but they all go through negative cash flow. And why can't they succeed? Because when they go to government, Department A, Department B, Department C, Department D deliver KPI for every department, but do not give the holistic support that the individual needs. So the result is, if the ecosystem is not generated, you cannot go from the J curve to the S curve. This is a chart that was designed by somebody called Bringelhofen from MIT, who was talking about innovation. And in this, he was not talking about the J curve that goes through negative energy, negative cash flow, to positive and becoming wealthy. Zakat is the circular economy. When the rich begins to give to the poor, when those who are wealthy in knowledge gives to the poor, the underprivileged, these one in the valley of death, who were trapped in the desert, will eventually come out and flower. And that's what we need to do, right? So the framework, sorry I'm maybe talking too long, is we're moving from campus to ecosystem. We're moving from a single urban campus to a distributed rural, indigenous hub, right? The role of the student is no longer sitting there waiting to be told by teacher. The student actually having the access to the AI knows more than the teacher, right? So the student is actually an active contributor. We can go not from, education, but edu-tourism. What was the biggest success of America? Peace Corps. The young of America came all the way to Sabah, to Africa, to Cambodia. When they saw what was going on, they went back and changed the curriculum and changed their outlook in life, and they got richer, and the people who they touched, like my former teacher was a Peace Corps guy. My former teacher was a British volunteer service overseas, right? And gardenia bread, who everybody must be consuming, was succeeded because a company in Sabah hired the first American bakery expert to make bread in Sabah to raise the quality of bread in Sabah, and today it's at least a Malaysian regional brand. So the role of the elder is no longer I make my money and then I retire. In the old village, in the family, in tightly knit societies, people have little playtime. They play in order to learn. The 12-year-old sister is looking after the 9-year-old brother or younger sister. The grandfather, the grandmother is looking after the babies when the parents are working. So the community is an organic body that survives through millennium. Governments collapse, but the families survive because they maximize their energy, maximize their knowledge to adapt to local conditions. So the economic flow is no longer going to be extractive, it is going to be regenerative. The technology purpose is not physical substitution, but preparation and remote connection through the digital world. So the productivity multiplier has to be AI. So I'll come back to the AI issue. And AI is driven by energy. Don't forget this, right? So the productivity impact McKinsey has calculated could generate $2 to $3 trillion extra revenue a year. And the AI potential impact, is going to be huge. But this is the global reality. The global reality is the United States has a different approach towards AI. China has a different approach to AI. European Union has a different approach to AI. And the global South has also got a different opportunity in AI. And my view is very simple. What is Malaysia, what is every university in Malaysia doing to use AI diffusion, not AI generation? We cannot compete. We do not have $725 billion US dollars to invest in these new models. Okay? We have to use these models to generate so that our young people can adapt these models and find new tools for them. So we've moved beyond the campus. We have decentralized, just as Malaysia has now decentralized into every state. Sarawak, energy state. Johor, close to Singapore, the new urban, development state. Penang, the advanced manufacturing state, right? Every state is beginning to find their own different opportunities based upon their own special, unique advantages. And so universities have to do that. We have to de-silo education. We have to have regenerative impact, and we must have capital and wisdom, synthesis, and trying to find the money. So, to sum up, why is Sunway City so successful? Because Tan Sri Jeffrey had the foresight, and his team had the foresight to build not only the residential housing, the hospitals, the university, the infrastructure, the ecosystem, right? And so we move from the infrastructure into the application layer, and then into the, where wisdom and branding makes your money. All right? My father used to say, the first $100 you make through blood, sweat, and tears. The second, million that you're going to make is the money makes the money. And the billions that you're going to make is when your reputation makes the money. It's the branding, ultimately, right? So what is the final judgment to sum this all up? And I'm sorry I have to use the Chinese word for this, right? Ultimately it's about leadership. And leadership is about the will of not just the leader, but every single person to change, to respond to these uncertain changes. And that comes from the word shi, which means warrior, and above the word heart, brave heart. If you have no political will, if you have no will, you cannot succeed. But if you are like Braveheart, who created Scotland, okay? If you are Steve Jobs, who in spite of everybody saying that he lost in the first phase, he came back and built the new Apple. He was a warrior, Braveheart. He has to have the second part, which is strategic patience. And what is the Chinese word for patience? A knife in the heart. It is very painful to be patient, right? And so if you combine the will to act and the patience to act, we will succeed. So on that note, thank you very much. I hope I haven't talked too long and too much. Thank you very much indeed. Okay.
Wow, Tan Sri. And ladies and gentlemen, I think let's give Tan Sri Andrew Sheng a huge round of applause. You'll agree that we just did not hear simply a lecture, but that was really a masterclass in heart-driven empowerment in making sense of an increasingly complicated world. Thank you so much. And you reminded us that, that while we often focus on the geopolitics, the artificial intelligence, and economic transformation, the real battleground is ultimately human capability. And being here at the university, you ultimately talked about the choke point where there is a widening deficit between our foundational talent, education. And I must say, you also demonstrated extreme bravery, talking about taking risks to make impact, because at Sunway, a lion's den is not a figurative concept. We actually have lions just a few hundred meters away. But don't worry. So now we have an opportunity to engage directly with Tan Sri, and I know that we are already almost 6 p.m. Um, so I'm gonna, and there's so many external members from the members of public who are here today. So I want to give you all the opportunity to actually start with questions with the floor. So could you please introduce yourself, raise your hands, and then ask your question, and keep it as short as possible so that we can have as many opportunities. All right, so the floor is certainly now to the audience. Okay, great. Do we have someone with the microphone? No, it's okay. That's, yeah, sir, could you introduce yourself? And then-
Earlier said the the graduates need to retrain. Is it talking about the local university graduate or overseas graduate? Just a simple question.
Thank you. He was certainly not speaking about the Sunway graduates, certainly higher than that. Tan Sri, the question was when you were alluding to the fact that the majority of students that graduate require retraining, were you referring to local or was this a global phenomenon?
Well, you know, the book that I've just shared with some of you was the transcripts of the conference we held in Bhutan last June called Operationalizing Gross National Happiness. And unlike other conferences that were held in Bhutan, it was not about foreigners telling Bhutanese what to do. The whole purpose of the conference was to have a conversation in which the Bhutanese tell us what their real problems were, the real challenges of having an aspiration and translating it into action. And Bhutan is a landlocked country. They were very lucky because the great leaders like the fourth king, when he was asked by a journalist, how are you going to do in GDP? He said, I'm not going to go for GDP. I'm going to go for gross national happiness. So, you know, everybody considers Bhutan to be one of the happiest countries in the world, but, you know, they were suffered a lot through COVID. And because, you know, everybody's, you know, felt that, you know, this is a very lovely country, we give them lots of education. So a lot of Bhutanese receive education in Australia, in Canada, in America, in London, Europe, etc. And these people became overqualified. So when COVID came and there was no tourists coming into Bhutan, up to 10% of the 10% of the population migrated overseas to get jobs. Now, is that good for Bhutan or bad for Bhutan? When your best people leave. So one of the quotes that I got, which I thought was remarkable from one of the top educationists, is that the way we were educated may not necessarily fit our own needs. So how do we educate our own people to fit our needs is now, in fact, the real challenge.
Oh, brilliant. I think just shedding that ivory towers, right, and actually being out there and engaging.
Because
with the
most of
various-
us, you know, take our curriculum from the West,
Yeah.
the best practice, whatever, the best standards. But, you know, if you over-educate somebody, you know, when it comes down to a condition where I don't have a consulting engineer in my village to tell me how to build this building, nothing happens, right? So I just have to take risks. I just rely on indigenous skills and build it to the best possibilities.
Totally. Right. Next question. Okay. Over at the back, and then you, sir, shortly.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'm a student of Islamic finance. So, and the way you summarize, like in one minute or 2 minutes, that was the crux. So I was really amazed. Quick question: from J curve to S curve. Somehow, again, two things quickly. First thing, I was always confused that how come the thing that we realize, we understand why people at the top don't. So today I've realized everybody knows how to exercise Islamic finance. It's only perhaps lack of the will or the other thing, apart from the political motivation, turning from J curve to S curve, there has to be the exogenous force that we call capitalism. do you think that zakat or the other ways of free distribution, would they be able to fight, or would they be able to neutralize that exogenous force that that is a hindrance in becoming that J curve to S curve in a real model? Thank you.
Well, we tend to use labels. So, what is the most interesting thing about capitalism? Capitalism is about man exploiting man, and socialism is the other way around. Same thing, right? The issue is not about whether it's capitalist or is non-capitalist. It is how do you move from the J curve to the S curve. And if you don't get the new energy, nothing moves without energy. If the things is still, it is because there's no new energy coming to make the things move. Okay? So once you begin to understand that, but we know what's inertia. Because if when the thing sits still, it's very difficult to move it. But once you move it, you get out of the J curve, it begins to roll. And if it rolls downhill, it goes faster and faster, which is the S curve. But why doesn't it move? And the answer is everybody don't want to take risk. You ask for approval, nobody wants to take risk. They think that they don't want to move. But if you don't move and everything else move, you are going to be lunch. So what you have to do, you have to move. And this is why it's so hypocritical. The West tells you you have to move on climate change, but I'm not going to finance you. But who destroyed the climate first? They were the ones who destroyed the climate first, right? So my point is, you're wasting energy trying to complain about them not giving you energy. Because there's energy free in the world. If you know how to use solar, if you know how to use micro hydro, if you can use wind, it's free energy. And if and why aren't university students and professors teaching this young, going down direct to the universities to help them go beyond that valley of death J curve? Your time is already paid for. Okay? So a lot of people don't realize this. They say that, oh, I'm not using this university, another place that I know, another university. They complain that the consultant on their own systems doesn't work. I said, hey, you got a business school, you got AI experts, you got engineering experts, you got management experts. How come your professors are not teaching your students how to make your own systems work better? Doctor, heal yourself. I don't want to see a doctor who can only talk theory. I want to see a doctor who has cut many, many patients before and has successful patients before I go and believe the doctor. Same issue.
Excellent point. I mean, I think the idea of pragmatism and understanding how to actually serve your local needs and self-sufficiency. All right, sir, you had a question. Could you maybe introduce yourself? The microphone is just coming to you now.
Yeah. Thank you. I must congratulate Tan Sri and Andrew, good friend of mine. I really enjoyed your presentation. We made remarks about the Islamic thing, the connection. I think it's the essence of education, and it's the heart. In Islam, is the heart that should control the brain, not the brain controls the heart. I really like you combine these factors into a very good kind of a way of addressing civilization, addressing history. And also like to take in a smaller way that this university has tried to bring an ecosystem that make people more responsible towards education, towards the environment, towards society. This is quite good combination. I'm not commenting anything. I'm just saying that it's a very good presentation on your part. Thank you, Andrew.
Oh, thank you, Tan Sri.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm only applying what I call the scars of behind my back. And you learn, and you have to continually learn.
All right, so we have a lot of your fans on the virtual platform. So our Sunway Education Group registrar is going to read one of the questions. Ms. Ng Beng Lian.
The question is from our board members, Ms. Lee Chun Sian. The question is, how can Malaysia balance between China versus US in terms of politics and economic integration. And further added was China has its AI standards and US has its own. How about Malaysia? Thank you.
You know, that's a very good question. We are in a war of elephants. And when the elephants fight, the grass gets trampled. When the elephants make love, the grass also gets trampled. And so we are the pelanduk. We are the small creatures. And the way we can avoid being trampled by either elephant or other elephants is to be nimble, adaptable, and fast. If we are a small country, that's what we should be. But are we? That's the issue, right? So, you know, if you want to survive in this world, you no longer have the myth, you know, that the 7th Cavalry will come to your rescue. When I was young, I loved Western movies. Now I realize I'm the Indian.
I'm looking at you and I'm saying, maybe,
Well,
genetically speaking.
I'm going to put a feather on my thing and I say, I'm
Totally.
tonto.
No, excellent point. I actually was going to ask you because you talk about, you know, sort of internal local sufficiency and relying on yourself, but you also alluded to the fact that we do live in a network and, you know, that you need to collaborate, you need to engage, and that sometimes can be contradictory. So, and you just answered this, right? I mean, the agility, the nimble, you know, this leadership. But I think the question is also for Malaysia. That gap is also because the government, as you alluded to, has got financial constraints, right? And especially in a world where political expediency and instant gratification, this is obviously an issue. We at Sunway University are certainly very lucky because we have the Jeffrey Cheah Foundation, and through Tan Sri Sir's philanthropy, it allows this. But part of the problem is that philanthropy is treated as a charity rather than actually seen as actually a real fiscal infrastructure that can actually drive the kind of growth that you're speaking to. So what should be done you know, for governments to recognize the value that philanthropy actually brings to ecosystems like Sunway?
You know, I think the concept of wakaf and zakat embodies blended finance. You need the charity to give the startup. And in a sense, the family and friends is charity. Basically, you know, you're a very bright young man, you want to go into this new venture, you don't have enough money, your uncle will lend to you, your father will support you, your friends who trust you will give you the money. That's the charity part. But charity is not sustainable. You must remember this, you know, because exactly as the dictum said, trade, not aid. Trade is self-help. Aid depends on somebody and ends up with aid dependency. So after a while, the person who received the aid says, oh, you must give to me. That's not true. Why should I give it to you? I give it to you because I hope you will do good things. All right? So when somebody asks me, oh, Andrew, you and your family, are you willing to give a scholarship to somebody? I thought long and hard about this. And I said, if I give a scholarship to somebody and that somebody doesn't remember who gave them the scholarship, the purpose of the scholarship, and then says, okay, because I got first class honors or summa cum laude, I go to America or elsewhere and it's all due to myself. They've forgotten their roots. Okay? We must give with humility, but we must also accept with remembrance. So those people who get the aid must remember that when they make it, they must help those who cannot make it. You know, very often the people who make it, they always say, when I become a billionaire or trillionaire, oh, I will do some charity. After a while, what do? Right? They want to go to Mars. Right? So the reality is, what can we do to make a difference? And I think whilst we are still alive, we still got the energy, we can give the energy to empower the young to make their own mistakes or to go in what we hope the steps that will make not just this generation, but the next generation succeed. So, there was yesterday I attended a multi-faith issue, and there was talking about one indigenous people who always had one idea. Whatever you do, let's ask what happens 7 generations from us, so that whatever we do will not harm 7 generations ahead. And I thought that was brilliant. That is the wisdom that we've forgotten.
Wow. Tan Sri, I think, okay, well, one more question, and then we'll probably have to call it an end to today. I was just going to say that deserves a round of applause. I mean, perfect example of heart-driven empowerment. Thank you.
Yeah, seems Malaysians benefit from the revival between US and China. If our political regimes changes in Malaysia, will the country be able to still survive and navigate through this revival between US and China? Will Malaysia still exist?
Well, when people talk about, the last article I wrote was, the Foreign Affairs magazine had a series of articles. Who will win the next war? That means either US or China. And I said, I'm sorry to say this, that's a stupid question. Because it's either or. It's as if, it must be either America or China, okay, or somebody else. That's a stupid question. Because if we kill each other, who wins? Nobody wins. There was a very famous climate change guy said, whatever human beings talk about who causes climate change, whatever, human beings may not survive, but the planet will still go on. The planet will still survive, but human beings will kill themselves. So what is more important is for us to think about what's the right answer on the right question. The right question is not zero sum. It is that we can work together to create a better world, not just between human justice, but also planetary injustice. Okay? Because if you really think about what's happening in our daily lives, every time human beings celebrate, an animal or a plant dies. That's not fair to, the plants and the animals. So why can't we think about a way in which we celebrate our happiness, but does not create unhappiness for somebody else? That's, a philosophy. It is true in many religions. Do not do to others what you would not do to yourself. And so we have very basic values, but ultimately the purpose of a university is train the next generation so that it will solve the problems of the future and not make the mistakes of the past.
Wow. Thank you, Tan Sri. Excellent. And I think your reminder about, perhaps in that context, the way in which we celebrate things, maybe it's not just about whether you eat lunch or be lunch. Maybe we should consider intermittent fasting. Yes. Yeah.
Quite correct.
Yeah. But jokes aside, let's give a huge round of applause to the superstar, Tan Sri Andrew Sheng. We will now invite Professor Dato Elizabeth Lee to accompany Tan Sri, Dato Sri Dr. Sir Jeffrey Cheah on stage to present a token of appreciation to the absolutely amazing keynote speaker today. We have this commemorative teapot to celebrate, I guess, a partnership that also represents the real world that we live in today. It's the Sunway University and Lancaster University's 20-year partnership. A partnership that demonstrates that a university here at Sunway is locally sufficient, but we still believe that we live in an interconnected world that requires that mutual respect. I'm just wondering, should we have removed the table to get a good photo, or you managed to get? Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Nothing to apologize. I mean, we're just really disappointed we had so little time. We will now proceed with a group photograph. May I invite our photographers to coordinate the session? So perhaps we have Ken and team. And can I invite all the survivors to come in right? And can you stand up so that there's no gaps between the spaces that we actually have? Yeah, please come. Those on the right, can you please come in front? There's quite a number of spaces over here. Yeah. Please join us as well. Yeah.